Soul condition. So what is soul condition is the real question. Well, firstly, there's all the sensory experiences that the soul has experienced through its bodies. So there's sensory experiences that when you're awake on earth, you're absorbing senses from this physical body to your spirit body and to your soul, right? So remember there's a cord between the two, a silver cord, and all the sensory experiences from your physical body are being passed to your spirit body, and they're all also being passed to your soul. So you could say all the sensory experience that the child had is getting passed to the soul. So if it had the experience of being smacked when it was small, that sensory experience is being passed to the soul. If it had the feeling that it was, hair was combed when it was small, and it enjoyed the sensation, then that is getting passed to the soul, and so forth. All these sensory experiences, all the tastes that it has, and this is why a child, much to the consternation of the parents often, the child is like tasting everything.
It's a phase, isn't it? So
it picks up its own poo, tastes that. Oh, that is very good. It picks up something like fruit or whatever. Oh, that tastes good, I'll have more of that, and so forth. And it's basically assessing taste, isn't it, during that process? And there's emotional experiences that is happening during its assessment. And these emotional experiences are also stored in the soul. So the emotions attached to this sensory experience are also stored in the soul. So it's impossible for anybody to be completely emotionless. You understand? Because the sensory experiences trigger emotion. And those emotions get stored along with the experience. So it's impossible to be like completely numb to everything, right? So even a person who's called a sociopath on earth or something like that is still probably likes his food or his drink, or because he's had sensory experiences attached to emotion. So he might not like people, but he still has the experience of liking other things. Does that make sense? Yeah? So you got the emotion that's a part of it as well. Of course, the two in combination start generating beliefs about pain versus pleasure, don't they? Some events feel painful, some events feel pleasurable, some events feel like you don't want them anymore, some events feel like you'd like more of them, right? And so that starts happening where you start storing your memory of everything. And also what starts getting stored are, naturally, beliefs associated with these experiences. Right? They're all getting stored in your soul. Make sense?
Yeah.
And also, these things, because they are now in you, getting stored in you, and the more you don't feel certain things, the more they remain in you. So an example of that is, let's say I had a sensory experience. I was learning to walk. I had a sensory experience that I got up to learn to walk, wobbled a bit, fell over on my face, like bang, on my head. Now that hurt, right? I was only, let's say, 1 year old or less maybe. I think I started to learn to walk when I was 9 months old. So bang, that happens. So that happens. Now, if you're not allowed to process the emotion of that fully, there'll be an attachment of the unprocessed emotion to the experience. Do you understand? Now, interestingly enough, most parents allow their children, which is fortunate, we allow our children to have a cry when they fall over, generally, right? And in fact, many parents do allow that happen completely. Like, they might hold the child, but they're not trying to shut down the child from crying because they can see it hurt itself. And most parents in that place generally go, just cry all that out, that's all good, And so the child doesn't join the stored emotion with the sensory experience. So the next day, it gets up and tries to walk again. But if it had have joined and could store that emotional experience, there'd be a memory of the experience that it was a bad experience. And now the child would be less inclined to try walking the next day. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? Because there's a joining of a painful emotion which was not allowed to fully pass through the soul. See, the intention of God creating emotions was that they would pass through you. Good or bad, they would all just pass through you. You wouldn't retain any of them. You would just have constant experiences. This is a part of the joy of life. You have one day you have this experience and the next day you have another experience, and they're often different experiences because there's different emotions attached. Now, of course, there's a lot of good emotion. So if they're all like pleasurable emotions, you could be having all sorts of pleasurable experiences, but each experience will be different to the other, right? So this is great, and it's just passing through you, it's not getting stored. But if you attempt to store one of them inside the soul, and that happens through the imposition of other emotions at the time you were experiencing the first one. So an example of that is, I'm crying and my father is annoyed with me for crying. So now I'm absorbing two things. I'm absorbing the sensory experience of having some pain, which I wanted to cry about, but I can also feel my father, even as a 1-year-old, I can feel he's saying, oh, the child's crying, he's a bit of a wuss, you know, that kind of, feeling that already, you know, like feeling that, like, or even worse, that he's extremely angry with hearing the child crying, right, under those circumstances. Now the child's absorbing another set of emotions, which are also very intense, relating to the event. So now it's going to be associating the two sets of emotions with the sensory experience. One set that it's allowed to cry, maybe from its mum. The other set that's not allowed to cry, maybe from its dad. So now it's already developing a tendency towards crying when in the company of women, but not crying when it's with men. Does that make sense? The belief is now getting established inside the soul due to the stored emotion. Right? So the problem is shutting down the emotion, and there's a number of ways we can shut down emotion. One is just by projecting unloving feelings at the child. You can shut down the child's emotional expression. The child is more prone to experiencing emotion when there's no unloving projection, but if there is unloving projection, the child associates the unloving projection with its experience at the moment, whatever is happening at the time. Right? So let's say the child went up to, quite often you see this in multicultural countries where the parents have some racism, the child doesn't. So the child goes up and starts associating with a child of a different race, but it receives a heap of projections from the parent about that. Right? So now the child is associating the colour of the person with the unloving projection of its parent. And that's now getting stored as emotion inside of itself and as a belief inside of itself. Those people shouldn't be associated with. Those people can't, if the parent's feeling is they can't be trusted, then the child's starting to feel they can't be trusted. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of very damaging things that happen during this phase of development that are all getting stored as a part of the soul condition. So the thing I want you to remember is this soul condition is being developed over time through the experiences, and it's all getting stored as your memories. And the memories are not stored in your mind, they're stored in the emotions of your soul. The brain of your soul stores the memories. Make sense? It stores the memories as pictures, events, as well as smells, tastes, as well as emotional feelings and experiences, as well as pictures, as well as noise, as well as also all of the senses are participating in the storage of the events, and these all come together to form the condition. Now, the more loving the experience, the more loving the condition will be. But the more difficult the experience, the more unloving the experience, the more unloving the condition will be internally, inside of the child, inside of the soul. Of course, this child also, on top of that, starts making its own decisions. And usually that starts occurring quite young. It's, you know, most of you know of the terrible twos, right? You've heard of that experience, that expression, which for most parents it's terrible because the child's now acting independently of the parent to the parent's consternation. Like the parent wants the child to do what the parent wants, and the child's got a will of its own, trying to develop its own will. And during that phase, particularly it begins when it's very young, when it can't reason very much, it's expressing its will emotionally. And you try controlling that, it's like pretty hard. And so that's when a lot of parents put more control on the child. This is when often the child starts to get spanked, for example, because of its behaviour. Or there's a lot of withdrawal of love from the child. Often the child is locked up or put away or put in a room, or lots of other things happen to the child during this phase of development frequently because of the parents trying to control the will of the child. And the more successful the parents were controlling the will of the child, the less developed the will of the child will become. So now we've also got a part of the soul condition is how the child is now allowed to express its will. Make sense? The child's only allowed to express its will in certain directions. When it expresses its will in that direction, the parent agrees with its behaviour, and therefore the child feels the environment is loving. And then on the other hand, the child's, when it expresses its will in a direction that the parent feels is wrong, and by the way, this is not measured by God's truth about whether it's right or wrong, but just by the parent's feelings, then the child joins the parent's feelings with its own development of its own will. Make sense? Very damaging to do this, of course, to the child, but this is a part now of the soul condition of the half of the child. So we're talking about the feminine half here in our examples. So now she's absorbed these different things all the way through, but also now her will is being manipulated by the feelings coming from the environment. And so in the Paget messages, when you read about soul condition, we're referring to a lot of things there. Does that make sense? So when you hear the word soul condition, when you look at what is their soul condition is quite a complex thing, isn't it? Because there's all these experiences and emotions and sensory feelings and beliefs and the memory of them all, and even to the point where the current state of the will of the individual has been set by these experiences. So then the question becomes, how do I get out of them if they're unloving? Because if that's all you ever were, can you see that would be a bad start and there'd be no correction? It'd be terrible if that was all you ever were. So if you are only your soul condition, it would be a terrible thing, because now your soul condition, which is largely being determined by all sorts of events, some of which you had no control over whatsoever, if you couldn't change it, it would be such a terrible start and there's no way to correct it. Right? So fortunately, there's other parts of your soul. Because if it wasn't for the other parts of your soul, where our life would be functionally damaged, usually by the time we're born. So what's the other parts of our soul? The other part of our soul is our soul aspiration. Fundamentally, you could think of it as the faith you have. What you believe is good for your future. And it's about determining, it determines the direction of your future choices. And they can frequently be completely different to the current state you're in. An example of that is, let's say by this stage, because of the different situations that have occurred and my own choices, I've got to the point where I'm a drunkard. Now I'm an alcoholic. because I'm trying to get away from my feelings. There's so many hard feelings that I want to get away from, and I have some beliefs that I'm allowed to get away from my feelings. It's a good thing to get away from my feelings. Everybody in society is telling me it's a good thing to get away from my feelings, and I've learned that drinking alcohol helps me get away from my feelings. So I'm focused. I've become what's called an alcoholic, and it's not a disease, by the way. It's a condition generated by a whole set of beliefs and will and emotion and sensory things that occurred over the course of our life that causes us to finish up there, right? And see, the average alcoholic believes, well, I'm an alcoholic for the rest of my existence. And not true. If that was true, it'd be very unloving. The so-called higher power, which is in the concept of Alcoholics Anonymous, wouldn't be a very high power if all he created was, you know, you having a predisposition towards a thing that you could never get rid of. That's not a very high power. Like, a high power would be somebody who created a system of things where whatever you had, you could get rid of. Right? That's a high power. So here we are on the soul aspiration side of things. What controls my aspiration? Well, obviously, you can see to some extent your condition may control your aspiration. So in other words, I've become an alcoholic. My belief is that I should be able to avoid my emotions, my painful emotions, my painful experience should be able to be avoided by me taking an action of drinking all the time. And I've found that it works. I get to avoid a lot of my feelings by me drinking all the time, right? And so I start to think that's really good. So you could say at this point, my soul aspiration is faith that drinking is good. It's helping me. That's my soul aspiration. Does that make sense? It's a belief for your future because it drives your current actions into your future. This basically says, so when I'm sober, I want to be drunk. Because the belief is when I'm drunk, I'm able to deal with my feelings better. Well, I'm not dealing with my feelings at all, but my belief is that I'm coping with life better, right? This is why I feel attracted to it. So you can see that the soul condition can determine, firstly, some soul aspiration, can't it? You can see if I've got the belief, I avoid my feelings, and then drinking a lot has helped me avoid my feelings, then naturally my aspiration is going to be to drink more so that I can avoid my feelings more, right? However, over time what will happen is this. I will recognise, as the person getting drunk all the time, that it's destroying my life one way or the other. Over time I'll start seeing my relationships decay. My children hate me. Everybody thinks I'm a selfish person who just wants to have alcohol and that's it. And so they don't want to associate with me anymore. So I finish up losing a lot of my friends. Right? There's a growing pain, which is a feedback system to my current condition saying, there's something wrong with your current system while you continue to do this thing, because you look at the results and you go, there's got to be something wrong. The results are proving there's something wrong. So can you see one of the things that change me is my belief that grows that something is wrong. In other words, that it's false. It's an illusion. It's not working. So this drinking thing, while it seems to feel good on one side, there's a lot of bad things that it creates which all feel bad on the other side. Now, the average drinker will just drink more, even with all those bad things, until he realises that the more he does it, the more bad things happen to him. He gets put in jail for his drinking. You know, he's harmed people, and then they all attack him with his drink, for his drinking. And he does more and more things that eventually become so painful that there's a smidge of a development of awareness in him that says, I need to stop. This is not working. Does that make sense? This is not working for me. There's something wrong with what I'm doing here. Now, of course, at this point, because he's uneducated, he doesn't know that his beliefs about his emotions are the main cause. And in fact, Most alcoholics are never taught that on earth, right? But if he was taught the truth, he would be able to see that quite clearly, right? But even though he doesn't know that truth, already there's now an aspiration changing in him to not drink. Can you see that? He's now having feelings that perhaps he shouldn't be drinking. And then he hears of things like Alcoholics Anonymous, which help people to not drink. So he thinks, I'll go there. They might be able to help me to not drink. You know, go there, tell my story. In the process of telling his story, he often will have some feelings. Some of those feelings might be connected to some of the emotions. This is why he drinks. And in the process of having that, he starts releasing some feelings. And sometimes those feelings mean that he's less inclined to drink. But he's not releasing his beliefs. Because he doesn't know that his belief is the main problem. His belief is that he should be able to get away from his bad feelings by taking a substance. That's his belief. He should be able to get away from bad feelings. So even though he's feeling emotions and telling his story, releasing some emotions, he still is not attacking the problem of his belief. Right? So this is why alcoholics generally feel that it's a disease, because the belief remains. And while the belief remains, so too will the inclination towards the behaviour. Or you could say the inclination towards the sinful act. The result of the sin. The belief is the sin, and the result of the sin is the sinful act. But he does have a soul aspiration developing that's saying stop. You were going to say?
I was just going to say back on your point about the inclination towards the behaviour. Actually, we could say, if we zoom out, this is one of the reasons why most people on earth don't believe that change is actually possible on any issue, for that exact same dynamic.
For the same reason.
Yeah.
So a lot of people believe their behaviour is a part of their personality. Not true. Right? But a lot of people believe that because they don't assess their beliefs and how their beliefs are guiding their behaviour. Right? But let's look at this soul aspiration. It has, you can see that it can grow over time to be completely opposite to the condition. So an example of the drunkard that I've just given, the alcoholic, he had a condition where he believes himself to be an alcoholic, but he also has an aspiration developing that he's got to stop drinking. So his aspiration is completely different to what his condition is now demanding. Can you see that? Now that the aspiration is different, he will move in the direction of his aspiration. Now that might happen over time, slowly, depending on the intensity of the aspiration. So initially the aspiration, when a person goes to, say, Alcoholics Anonymous or something, it might be quite small, and you know, 5 days later they have 5-day chips, and then by the 6th day it's all, you know, they're drunk again, you know. Yeah. Because the aspiration is quite small. But as time develops and there's another disaster occurs and another disaster occurs, the aspiration is starting to become quite large. Unfortunately, he still doesn't understand the power of his beliefs upon his behaviour, right? But at least he does know that he's got to change it. And the way he's changing it is by changing his aspiration. So instead of having a longing to drink, he now develops a longing to abstain. That makes sense? Now that he has this longing to abstain, even though his beliefs are saying don't abstain, you know, the aspiration is greater than even his own beliefs because he abstains. And a lot of times people have abstained for 20 years, 30 years, right? Because their aspiration has become greater than the belief that they can avoid their emotion through drinking is. Unfortunately, it's still pretty hard though, because the belief still exists. And while the belief exists, there will be still an inclination. So let's say a really traumatic event occurs, such as death of the partner. you'll get to the point where a traumatic belief is so great, the trauma is so great, that the emotion, the belief triggers, I don't want to feel that emotion, so the belief kicks in and says, I need to drink. Bang, I'm not drinking again. Overnight. Even after not drinking for 20 years. And that's why they call it a disease. Because the belief has not changed. The belief substantially is the same, that I can use a substance to get over bad feelings. Right? And because in that situation, the belief about death is such, like, so final, the average person goes, well now, like, up to now what I believed was I'd benefit by not drinking. But now that I've got this terrible pain of losing my loved one, my wife, let's say, or my partner that I've had for 20 years now because I've been sober the whole time, and I've lost her, now the belief inside of me is now, because the belief is still there, it's saying there are some things that are just so bad that you're never going to be really able to feel them. And so one of those things is the death of someone you love. So that belief triggers this other belief that I should be able to avoid that very, very, very painful emotion using the same method that I used before. Alcohol. And overnight, he's drinking again. Right? And sometimes he'll drink now for years after that, until he realised, actually, I can feel the pain of the loss of my partner, right? And that pain is a lot less than drinking and myself silly for the next 20 years. And then he'll stop. But unfortunately, he still has not dealt with the belief. So often the death of a child is worse than the death of a partner for people. And they feel, a lot of people on earth feel that the death of the child is the very worst thing you could ever experience. So let's say he's had children through this relationship, and one of them dies. Now he's going to revert back to his belief again. That is that bad that I cannot do it. And let's say not only does his child die, but he feels he's to blame for his child dying, which would even be worse, wouldn't it? Like, now it's like something he just doesn't want to deal with at all, emotionally at all. So now he's going to revert back to the belief. I can avoid this emotion using a substance, and away it goes again. That make sense? The aspiration, can I just say a few things about aspiration, what it actually is? You could say that it's a belief about your future, so it's faith, right? Which is a belief that something is obtainable in your future. So you could also call it a future belief, couldn't you? Well, it's not the right way to say it. It's, what's the right way to say that? A future likelihood, shall we call it? Not just a possibility. If it's just a possibility, it's probably not strong enough. But a future likelihood. Something that you feel quite certain will occur in your future. Yeah? So this future likelihood, this faith, this aspiration is a good word for it. In the Paget messages, you will see we use that word all the time. All the time. Soul aspiration. Aspiration. If you have an aspiration, you will change. Aspiration. Longing. Aspirations trigger longings. You will change. And so you could also call it, couldn't you? Passion towards a direction. Or you could call it a desire for a specific direction that you don't currently have. That's different than a desire that's driven by your memories. So an example of a desire driven by memory is that I've eaten, I like a lot of fruit, so I've eaten mangoes before. There are certain type of mangoes that are the best mangoes, right? So when I've got a choice of all the different types of mangoes, my memory is telling me that one there is the best one, right? And so I'll go to that. Now, even if there's a brand new type out, that I've never tried, I'll be very strongly tempted to just go the one I already tried, right? And so that you can say I've got a desire for that type of mango, right? And Mary knows me well enough to know that's what I do. So,
I'm laughing because I'm always like, why don't we try that?
Well, let me try that one, and I go, is it ever going to be? And then we try it, and I go, yeah, it fell down. I want to go back to the other one. And so, you know, that being said, I do like trying new mangoes because I always sort of feel that mango's pretty tasty, right, for the most part. Mind you, there are some pretty bad mangoes. Grainy, stringy things, and not very sweet, you know, and you know, so there are bad ones and there are good ones. And some also have a sort of a funny taste, like they're half rotting even though they're ripe and stuff like that. There's all sorts, isn't there?
Turpentine.
Yeah, so yeah, well, turpentine, that's a more chemical problem.
Have you tried Indian mangoes?
Oh, I've tried all sorts of mangoes.
We're segueing into mangoes now.
Yeah, don't you say mangoes. I'm giving you an example of how your memory and your prior emotional experience is driving a desire. But that's not the same as the type of desire we're talking about here. This is a desire for something you've never done before. Does that make sense to you?
Or you've never had,
or you've never had it before,
yep.
that experience before. Right, so this is about desires that you've not currently experienced or had a memory of having, but now you want to have one. Right? And this, you can understand the importance of this because when it comes to your relationship with God, you start out by not having one. And at some point, if you're going to have one, you're going to have to develop a desire, a faith, that a future, a soul aspiration, that a future position is possible to you. A relationship with God is possible. Now, partly education can help you. So when it comes to aspiration, there are things that support aspiration. You could say truth is a thing that supports aspiration, couldn't you? So an example of the man who's the drunkard, the truth, facing up to the truth that his life is a mess because of the alcohol abuse, and that he could get his life to not be a mess just if he left that one substance alone. That's a truth that he's come to face. Once he faces that truth, he can develop some aspiration. So you can see the truth supports an aspiration. This is why education is very important, because when you get educated about things you don't know about, you can then accept some truths that you didn't accept before, and those truths can start developing aspirations for you. They trigger the creation of aspirations. Another part of developing an aspiration is humility. You can see in the case of the humility. You can see in the case of the drunkard, he's got to be humble enough to assess the pain of his current situation, and he's also got to be humble enough to see that he could change it. Doesn't he? He's got to have sort of two sets of humility, one relating to his current situation and one relating to the future, that it's possible to change it, right? And he's got to be humble enough to accept his current situation emotionally. He's got to go, yeah, I'm in a mess. It's a terrible mess I'm in. If I didn't have this substance, I wouldn't be in such a mess. This helps his humility to the truth of the matter will help him see and face the fact. Another part of things that drive aspiration is love, the desire to love. In the case of the alcoholic, he's sick and tired of hurting people, other people. He realises, I've hurt my children, I've hurt my parents, I've hurt my wife, I've hurt every relationship I've ever had. I've lost my jobs, you know, they were good jobs and I've lost them too, and I've hardly got any money because I just spent it all on alcohol. It's all, the whole lot is a mess, right? So his desire to get to love somebody, can you see? Love his children, love his wife, love people, you know, even the future people he meets, causes the aspiration to build. But also his desire to love himself, can you see, also causes the aspiration to change. Because if I love myself, I wouldn't go, I'm not going to harm myself every day, all my life. If I cared about myself in any way, I wouldn't choose to do that. So after a while, his love for his self is greater than his love of avoiding the feelings. And that causes an aspiration to change. So there's a balancing, a priority, an internal priority system going on where now the things that I put priority on before, which were destructive, they are down here now instead of up here. And my building aspiration, because I want to love people, I want to face the truth, I want to be humble about it, my building aspiration is now higher than my aspiration to sin. Now I'll stop. Can you see? I'll only stop sinning when my aspiration to no longer have the effects of it is greater than my aspiration to have the sin itself. Yeah? Then I'm changed. I'm going to change because of that. So change is possible, but only when the soul aspiration develops to the extent that it's greater than the desire to remain in harmony with your condition. So that, in other words, what you want for your future is more important to you than living your current life. Well, that's another way of saying it, isn't it?
Yep.
So what you want for your future is more important than just holding on to what you currently have. Right? In other words, your soul aspiration is more important to you than your condition is. It's another way of saying that. When your aspiration is greater than your condition and more important to you than your condition, you could say, as a priority, internal priority system, the aspiration must be greater than your desire to remain in your current condition. If that is true, you will change no matter what happened to you, no matter what start you had, no matter what memories you have, what beliefs you have. All of that doesn't really matter anymore. Doesn't even matter what your will is currently even set to do, because your aspiration is changing it. Your aspiration is now affecting your will and causing you to make a different choice, even though your current soul condition is saying, go and do that thing. Your future aspiration is saying, no, that's not good. Do this thing instead. Right? Now, obviously, at the beginning of this, it's quite difficult, right? Because the soul condition is going to scream at you, I want what I want. And if the soul aspiration is not strong enough to overcome that condition, then you'll still do what you think you want. But if I measure the pain by facing the truth, I'm humble to the truth about what's going on, and I desire to love more than I currently do, then what will happen is this aspiration will build, and now change becomes possible in the direction you want it to occur. So, can I also say, and this is something to bear in mind, that change may be towards a downward trend as much as it could be towards a upward trend.
Cool.
Why'd you have to go into
Well, it can be, can't it? I could be in a certain condition right now that says, you know, I'm happy to be like in a sexual relationship with just one person. But some person comes along and convinces me that having a threesome is a lot better thing, right? And I think upon it, and I ponder upon it, and I feel about it, and I go, maybe that's true. And I wonder about it, and I reason with myself about it. Eventually, the reasoning and the wondering, if I don't see the full pain that such a thing creates before I engage the action, then it's likely I'll engage the action. You understand? So I'm developing an aspiration to do something that I don't realise is going to have some negative consequences. Because the people around me are telling me it's great, it's fantastic, it's all good. It hasn't had any negative consequences for us because they're all insensitive to their feelings, and they're all insensitive to their beliefs, and insensitive to their will, insensitive to love. So they all think it doesn't have any problem, but of course it is having problems for them too. But then when I try it, I destroy my marriage. Bang. Like all sorts of different things start happening between the couple. And then I realised, gee, you know, like I thought that would work out well, but it isn't working out well, right? So that now causes a correction. Can you see? It's good if you can measure the future potential results before you engage the behaviour, isn't it? It's like the drunkard who was not a drunkard when he was probably 12. He might have, you know, be later, but he wasn't when he was 12. Didn't have a desire to drink all the time, right? Can you see that if he was taught how to deal with his hard emotions, and he was taught how to deal with that and cope with his emotions without needing substances, and he was taught and also came to believe that using substances is bad for him emotionally because it suppresses his feelings, and he was taught all that, and he believed it, he'd have to believe that. Can you see when he was offered alcohol to get out of his first major problem, he would go, I don't even feel the desire to do that, you know, I just want to deal with my problem, like feel my problem, right? So he wouldn't even been attracted to it in that place, to do that thing. So attractions that create aspiration are presented to you from everywhere. People, spirits, you know, occurrences on earth, and particularly there's a lot of things that are happening on earth right now where the person sort of believes that looks good to me. Shiny, you know, attractive to me. It looks good to me if I do that thing. So, you know, many of you ladies are faced with this whole thing about, you know, fixing yourself with plastic surgery.
Can we not call it fixing? Yeah, can we call it?
Well, no,
we've solved that, aren't we?
The belief is that you are fixing yourself with plastic surgery, right? And that develops because everybody looks better you know, initially maybe, many of them do, initially. But then you examine the ones 20 years later, what do you see? So, oh, God, it's terrible. And you start, but imagine you're the very first person doing plastic surgery and you don't have anybody to look at 20 years later to examine. And imagine also inside of you, you feel bad about yourself and you feel bad about your appearance.
Well, your belief is I'm aging, therefore as a woman my value is decreasing.
My value is going down, my sexual value
has taught us that our value is sexual, and if it's decreasing, well then we are less valuable.
So now I'm going to be very attracted, I'm going to develop an aspiration to be very attracted to the thing that's going to harm me. Does that make sense? So aspiration works in a positive manner as well as a negative one. So it's very, very important, if you want to understand the soul, it is very important for you to understand how aspirations develop. You see that? Because aspirations are your method of change. They're the way in which you're going to be able to change. Right? And many of us don't understand how these aspirations develop, and this is part of our problem. Okay? So, Heather.
So the deep-seated beliefs that we have from conception can change through our soul aspiration.
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Yes,
Correct.
that's why it's so exciting, isn't it? Because like nothing is static.
None of you are going to remain the person you are now.
Have you taught in the past that we can get rid of our beliefs by changing or by feeling our emotions? Like, is this kind of a different way of changing our beliefs?
It's not just feeling your emotions, is it? Because remember, your emotions are attached to beliefs. So you've got to work through beliefs in order to change. Remember I gave the example just earlier that the alcoholic, if his major belief is to avoid his emotions, even though his aspiration is strong to not drink, his emotions, whenever the emotions are triggered in such a way that he feels them intensely, he'll be tempted to drink because his belief hasn't changed. Right? Now, I have said all this before in different ways. You know, in the whole 2019 assistance group, I think
Which is not public, but yeah.
Which is not public. Yeah. We talk about this. And in fact, one of the things we want to do with in our next trip around is to actually go through some of that material in a 3-day session with people,
Yes.
like, as part of our next trip, because it's so important to understand. Yeah?
Heather, can we say that, or we need to say that you can't change a belief without humility, without feeling emotion.
Or without the desire to love, or the desire for truth.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. The feeling emotion in itself is not enough.
Right.
You must have these other aspirations in order for your belief to change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will feel, but you will be reinforcing the belief through
Over
the
and over.
feeling.
This is what many of you are doing. You think that I've said in the past, which I, by the way, haven't said. You think that by feeling your emotions, you're going to clear away all of your unloving behaviour. Not true. You've got to feel your false beliefs to clear away your unloving behaviour.
Which are
emotional.
Yeah.
Right. Now, perhaps I can give an example of that. Perhaps might help.
Yeah.
So let's say I have a false belief. So we might just leave this here, and I'll just rotate the board. So let's say I have a belief that that got established during childhood and my adult life, that I've got to protect myself from love. Right? Well, why would I have that, do you think? Any idea why you might have that? There's all sorts of things that might have happened, mightn't there?
I'm drawing a blank, but that is a big one for me.
Yeah, it's funny how it's blank though. Yeah, this is a big problem for many people, right? They protect themselves from love. So in other words, they feel that love is dangerous. So the false belief is that love is dangerous.
Love will take something from me. That's what I'm coming up with.
Yeah, that's right. Love hurts. So you're a Roy Orbison fan, basically. The song, you know that song, Love Hurts. There's so many songs about love hurting, isn't there? If you think about it. So a lot of people have the false belief, and those songs, almost every one of them went like #1. Interestingly enough, which is indicating that many people feel quite strongly that that belief is actually true, even though it's a false belief. So that's a false belief. Love hurts is a false belief. Yep. But my emotions, recording my sensory experiences and my past and all the things that happened, are saying, no, love hurts, love hurts, love hurts, love hurts. And I'm reinforcing that to myself constantly. Right? So that's me. I've stored this belief and it's in me, love hurts. What do I do? The average person says to themselves, that is true. So the average person is saying, that false belief, which is from God's perspective and also from love's perspective, is actually a false belief. They believe that that is true, that it's not a false belief, that it is a true belief, that love does hurt, you know?
And that protection keeps me safe from hurt. Yeah, but protecting myself from love keeps me safe from hurt.
Keeps me safe from hurt, right? So that's what they believe. So in that state, can you see, you're gonna probably not open yourself to people very much. You're gonna hide yourself a lot. Whenever love is offered to you, you're gonna go, oh, you'd be suspicious about it.
You just let a little bit.
You let a little bit in, but it's under control because you're always aware that at some point in the future it might hurt you. So you're sort of, I'm not going to give my whole heart to this. I'm just going to just give a little bit to this, and we'll just see where that goes. And then you might 10 years later give a little bit more to it, but 20 years later the guy leaves you, and then you go, see, love hurts.
And then, yeah.
So you get reinforced, love hurts again.
So then if we talk about feeling emotions, which is where the question started.
What emotion am I going to feel?
What will I feel when my husband leaves me, for example?
I was right.
Yeah, and if I'm crying, what would I be crying about?
Love hurts.
That is the...
Yes, this love did this to me.
Love
This is
did
the
this to
fault
me.
of love. I'm in so much pain about love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you see you could stay in that emotion of crying about love hurting you for the next year? Couldn't you? And substantially nothing will change, except, in fact, it'll be changing in the wrong direction, because you'll be more fixed, committed to the idea that love hurts, and therefore more committed to the idea that you have to protect yourself from it. This is why many people, by the time they hit their 40s or 50s, are living alone. Because they've had all these different experiences during their formative years and later that have reinforced to them they believe that love hurts, and it's become a belief, and it doesn't matter how much you cry about it, you're still going to think it. So you can process your emotion every day about that for the rest of your life, and you'll still believe that it is true.
The only thing that might change is similar to the alcoholic, where you go, this is really painful now.
I'm getting lonely. Nobody understands me or gets me. I don't have any real relationships anymore.
I'm miserable all the
I don't
time.
have many close friendships. Nobody really, I can't even talk about what's in my heart to anybody anymore. And you start measuring the pain of it all. And you go, yeah, it's painful, but if the pain is not as great as what you feel the love hurt, you're still not going to change. Right? You're still going to think, no, I'm right, love does hurt, I'm not going to do it. And you can be offered love in that state from a person who absolutely loves you and is never going to hurt you, and you won't even accept it. You won't. You will reject it for sure, because your belief is, I've got to protect myself from it.
So one has to bottom up. Sorry. Oh.
And so we have to have an aspiration in our soul to feel how much it hurts that we think love hurts.
Well, what's going to change is, see, love is a big thing, isn't it? So when a lot of times most people don't realise that if you have false beliefs about love, they are your worst false beliefs. You understand? Because they are big things that, see, a lot of people feel love brings happiness, but they also feel that love brings the very worst pain you could ever experience. Right? So if you have these false beliefs, can you see it's going to have to be something massive that's going to change your mind, probably, right? Or you're going to have to somehow disconnect the belief somehow from the emotions you have, aren't you? Somehow.
Like maybe by feeling God's love. That would be pretty massive.
Well, that's probably not going to happen because you think love hurts. So if you think love hurts, then God's love's going to hurt. So why would you ask God for love under those circumstances? You're probably not going to. And you're certainly not going to sincerely do it because you believe love hurts, and you sort of believe, well, God's going to hurt me too. The belief assumes that all love hurts. So therefore, it's all going to be bad. Right? So thinking about the principle from the board, the flip side of what we just taught, something's going to, so this is, you could say this is now my, what do we call it? Soul condition. Okay. And we've also said that change can only occur when my
soul aspiration is greater than condition.
Is greater than my condition. And we said that the things that change my aspiration are
passion,
desire.
That is my aspiration.
That is my aspiration. What changes it? We said on the previous board.
Faith in the future.
Faith. But
Possibilities.
that is soul aspiration. Truth
Yes.
changes it.
humility,
Humility changes
love,
it. My desire for love changes it.
and
Yeah.
desire.
Right, so these things change it. They change my faith. So faith is my soul aspiration, and these things change my faith. Okay, you follow so far? Okay, so here I am. I'm in this state where I believe my condition is such that I believe love hurts. I have to firstly get to the stage where I have an aspiration to believe something different to that, don't I? Yeah. Now, these things should give me an aspiration to believe something different, right? And particularly truth. You always focus on truth first. Truth sets you free, right? So you've heard me say that, and it's all written in the Bible, what I said in the first, and I've said this for 2,000 years, truth sets you free. So what's going to free me from my condition is facing the truth so that my aspiration can change so that a new condition is possible. Right? This is how your soul works. Your soul is not going to make adjustments just intellectually. You're going to have to accept some emotional truths. Remember, none of this is intellectual. You're not going to be able to go, oh, well, I really like a relationship now. I'm a bit lonely, and I feel a bit sad about not having anybody who loves me or who I can love. And so,
I'll just love.
I'll just love.
I'll give it a try.
I'll receive love.
Well, no, so people go, I'm just going to become loving now. I'll do some neuro-linguistic programming on myself. And I'll just become a loving person, and everything, I'll just talk about love all the time, and I will just become love. I will make this beautiful translation into becoming love, and then I will be love.
And then I will beat everyone with the knowledge that I am love. It's really
you can see you're just creating another fake world, really, right? Completely self-delusional. Because unless you understand how the soul works, and unless you're willing to change the basic fundamentals that are driving how it works, substantially nothing's really going to change, right? So the average person that's doing all this with their mind is just entering a place of even more delusion and denial than they were in before, right? So we've met many people that say, oh, I am now love, I be love everywhere. We had one actually say that in our group in Canada, actually, while she was actually attacking me at the time. So she wasn't love, but she believed she was love, And this is the delusions we enter because we don't want to understand how the soul works, and we don't want to actually change something substantively. We want to have some magical thing that means we don't understand how the soul works. We want to be able to make a change without understanding how our soul works. And a lot of times when we're taking things to God, we fundamentally want to make a change without understanding how our soul works. Right? And God's saying, but I want you to understand how your soul works, because if you understand how your soul works, you understand the amazing thing I created, you. You'll understand yourself. And we're going, oh, but I don't want to understand how the soul works, so I just want a magical solution to my problem. And if a magical solution is not actually possible, then let's fabricate one, like with my delusion. Let's do that instead. And there's a lot of this in New Age philosophy, fabricating delusions in order to avoid reality. That's why New Age philosophy is so damaging to people, because it's fabricating delusions to avoid reality. The reality is, unless I face some truth, and I'm humble, and I measure the results of my current place, I won't develop any faith to change it. Unless I educate myself with some truth, I will not develop anything to change it. Truth about love. So one truth about love is this: no one has to give you love. Not a single person has to give you any love. By definition, if they had to, it would not be love anymore. So nobody has to love you. Now imagine if you actually, at the emotional core of you, actually work through that feeling that people should love you. And realize that it was a sin to feel that they should. They don't have to. And you actually started to feel that it was a sin that you were projecting at other people that they had to love you. Imagine that. Can you see if you felt the sin that they had to love you, you would then feel that you're letting everybody off the hook for loving you. You would go through some quite big emotions about the fact that love doesn't have demands, right? And in the process of going through those emotions, you're letting go of false beliefs about love. One of those false beliefs would be love hurts, but love's only hurting if you look at the depth of this belief.
Yeah.
This is not the real belief. The real belief is that I can demand love.
Yeah, that's the flip side, isn't it?
When you say the flip side, it's the driving force of that.
People are going to hurt me, but I can demand love.
Well, the way you're saying it is even incorrect. And this is very interesting because I have conversations with people all the time, and they say they think that what I'm saying is what they're thinking, but no, it's actually worse than this. The belief I have that I can demand love creates love hurting. Do you understand how? If I demand love and then love isn't given, now I'm going to hurt. But if I see love as a gift, when somebody stops giving it, I don't feel hurt. I just say, thank you very much for the love you gave me the last 20 years. And you don't have to love me now. You can go and love somebody else if that's what you want to do. Do you understand? A person who demands love doesn't feel that way. A person who demands love goes, you've got to marry me. You're with me till death do we part. Right? It's written in the vows. To death we, you know. And you think about that. I'm actually saying, in that very vow is saying, I demand that you love me until I die. Of course, it's really interesting. Even that comment is, when I die, I won't care anymore. That's not true either. Because if I wanted to love me till I die, I'm going to want it to love me after I die too. Unfortunately. Yeah. I'm going to demand that from her even after I die because I'll actually still be alive. And so I'm going to continue demanding it. That makes sense to you? So here I am in the state where I've had a contract with Mary. It's written here. Can you see this document? It's horrible, right? We were talking to the minister last week, you know, who interviewed me for a position of being Jesus, and he was saying, "Are you two married?" I go, "So now this is a part of my job position too. I have to be married to Mary." And I said, "Well, yes, Mary and I are married. We were married in the first century, but it doesn't matter to me because what matters is." Does she love me in her heart? And if she doesn't, she shouldn't be with me. Simple as that. And if I don't love her in my heart, I shouldn't be with her either. In fact, the Bible even says that, interestingly enough. But most people ignore it because they're more focused on the marriage, like the contract. And the reason why they're focused on the contract is because they have the false belief. I can demand love. I can demand that you love me for the rest of my existence. Many of you have that demand going to your soulmates, that you can demand that they love you for the rest of your existence. That's why you haven't met them yet, one reason. Because it's a demand, it's unloving. Right? It repels people. If I demand that Mary loves me for the rest of my existence, I am not going to actually ever appreciate the love she actually gives me. Because I believe that she should have given it to me anyway. Right?
It's the same way with God, isn't it?
It's the same way with God. We often have the same projection of God. God, you say God loves me, then God should love me now no matter what I do, no matter what I feel, no matter what I think, no matter what actions I take, the personal love should still keep coming. But love, God's love is a gift. When we demand it, we're saying it's not a gift, it's an expectation. And now we're not even understanding love at all because a part of love is that it's a gift. You know, one of the very fundamental truths about love we're not facing. So the fundamental truth that we need to get an aspiration for here is that love is a gift. That's the truth. And here, my belief is, it's not a gift. I can demand it from somebody who says they love me for the rest of their existence. I can demand it. So we often hear from people saying, but my parents should have loved me. I'm sorry. They don't have to. Love is a gift. So they don't have to love you. Of course, we acknowledge the fact that they may not have has caused problems for you. But the fact that you demand it from them now is also your problem. Because you're out of harmony with love believing this. Make sense? So I can demand love drives the whole idea that love hurts. And that drives the whole idea that I can protect myself from it. So can you see, we're often not even anywhere near the core problem, even when we feel a certain thing. So I'm crying, I'm feeling my emotion, love hurts. Oh, it was terrible. You know, Mary left me. You know, she left me for some guy down the road. Isn't it terrible? And so I'm crying, you know, about how bad it is. And every time I think of Mary, I just feel like crying again. And then every time I think about loving somebody else, I just go, oh, but I want Mary, you know, but she doesn't want me. And isn't it terrible? And, you know, so I'm crying. So I'm in this love hurts place, which is actually just a reinforcement of my false belief. Right? And so after I feel that long enough, generally, because nothing's getting released,
then don't you?
I then develop this.
Yeah.
This other false belief.
To protect myself from love.
I'm going to protect myself from people loving me in the future.
But have you kind of nailed it, the start of the process before when you said I have to connect to the pain of having the belief that love hurts? Because that's the start of this process, is it not?
Right, that would be the truth.
This belief is actually creating pain, not love, the belief is. Yeah.
But what we often do is the opposite to that.
Yeah.
When we're feeling the emotion, we're not feeling the love hurts belief is the thing causing me pain. We're often saying to ourselves, love does hurt. That's why I'm in pain. Which is not the same thing. We're saying two completely different things, logically. Right. And then we take it even further and we go, let's create another false belief to support the fact that my earlier false belief was too painful to feel. So now we've created a layer of false beliefs upon other false beliefs. Right? And people do this all the time. All the time. So we get a layer and another layer and another layer, and now when we say let's, and then we hear divine truth and we go, oh, we've got to feel our painful emotion. So you know what happens? I start feeling my painful emotion that love hurts. So I feel that. I feel that a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Let's say I'm humble enough to even feel it for that amount of time. After 3 or 4 months of feeling it, let's say you're crying every day about love hurting for 4 months. Huh? And then you get to the point where you realise that actually nothing's changing. Nothing's changing. And at that point you can take 2 different directions. You can go, well, let's create the belief that supports me not feeling that hurt anymore. Which is, this one's saying, I want to avoid this one by creating this one. I want to avoid love hurts by creating protection. If I create the protection, then I won't have to feel love hurts anymore. Because I won't ever be in love again. Does that make sense? And so we create this one. So that's one direction we can take. That's an aspiration to avoid the painful emotion that we're feeling. It's a negative aspiration. It's going to lead us to a darker condition with less love in our lives. But we don't see it like that. We think it's protecting us, it's helping us. So we create it and we live in it. So that's one way. The other way is to come to the truth, which is, I think that I can demand love. And so when this person loved me and then they stopped loving me, instead of thanking them for loving me for a period of time, I'm angry with them for stopping loving me, which meant that I demanded that they love me, which meant that I didn't really understand love in the first place. Make sense? And when I start realising that, I go, what is the true belief? See, up until this point, I haven't considered what the true belief is emotionally, because I'm so embroiled in love hurts in that false belief, and then embroiled in maybe protecting myself from love because it hurts so much. I haven't even considered that the whole reason why I'm in the pain of love hurting is because of my own false belief about love. I haven't even considered that. I've just dismissed that out of hand, right? But now that I can see, I can demand love, and I go, let's look at the truth. Logically, so truthfully, is love something you can demand? When you start analysing that, you go, if I'm demanding it, then I'm not going to appreciate it as love. And also, love is a gift. It's a feeling somebody can have for me or choose not to. The fact that I'm demanding it is against the concept of free will, in that somebody can love me one moment, so it's against free will. It's saying, free will says somebody can love you today and they're allowed to not love you tomorrow. They're allowed to. Because love is a gift. So they're allowed to not love you tomorrow. But I'm thinking, no, that's not true. I want the contract. I want the marriage signed, sealed and delivered. I need the marriage. You look in your country, and in ours too, how many young women in particular aspire to be married? What does a marriage mean? It means that you're guaranteed you won't get hurt by somebody not loving you anymore. That's what they want. They want to, this belief, to retain this belief, to be guaranteed that there's no future possible withdrawal of love. But to give that guarantee, you'd have to not have will. Mm-hmm. People are allowed to choose to do what they want with their loves. And if one day they want to love you and then the next day they want to love Mary instead, they're allowed to do that, if that's what they want to do. Right? It's not even a sin for them to do that. It's not even a sin for them to one day love you and the next day love somebody else. Because their love is a gift and they're allowed to give it to whomever they want. Right? So it's not a sin for them to love someone else. And also, loves are not mutually exclusive. When I say loves, I'm not talking about romantic love now. I'm talking about other loves are not mutually exclusive. Romantic love has been designed to be mutually exclusive. But other loves have not been. Right? So what I mean by that is, romantic love, God designed through, remember we went through the design of the soul here, and we said the design of the soul was two halves. God designed that would eventually be the person you love. Right? And only that person. Romantically. Sexually. But aside from that, love can be given to, not romantic love, but other forms of love, can be given to any person and withdrawn at any time. Now, even can be given to your soulmate and withdrawn at any time. Because if it wasn't possible to do that, then it wouldn't be love anymore either. But when I say withdrawn at any time, not given to another necessarily, right? Just withdrawn. So your soulmate one day is allowed to go, I don't love you anymore. Of course, there must be reasons. And it'd probably be wise to have a look at them. But particularly bearing in mind it's the other half of you, And God designed the other half of you to like you. So if they don't like you all of a sudden, and they did before, then you've got to look at it. Is it because you're changing positively, or is it because you're changing negatively? You know, what's the reason? You'd have to look at that. But even if that is true, at the end of the day, I can't demand my soulmate loves me, because it wouldn't be love anymore if I did. So the false belief that is the opposite of this belief is what's causing my pain. It's the reason for why I'm in pain. Make sense?
Yes.
This false belief is the reason why I'm in pain, because I'm breaking a fundamental law by believing it. I'm breaking the law of free will. I'm breaking that law of believing this. So that's why I'm in pain. I'm breaking a law. Every time you're in pain, it's because you repeat after me. Every time I break a law, I am sinning. And
I'm in pain.
I will be in pain. Guaranteed. Every time. Every time. Now, the most powerful laws to break are which?
Free will.
The laws associated with spiritual principles. Remember we said that Friday, right? Yeah. Friday we said the laws associated with the spiritual principles. Love is a spiritual principle, is it not? It's the highest spiritual principle. You break a law associated with the highest spiritual principle, you're going to be in the most pain you can imagine. This is why love hurts. Because when you break the laws of love, right, this is why you believe love hurts. Obviously it's not true. You know, you break the laws of love, that is going to hurt the most. And this whole concept that love hurts, not true. The concept that's hurting me is that I am breaking the law of love. The law of love says people have free will, they're allowed to withdraw love from me. I can't demand love. Love is a gift. Right? Can you see how I can focus on that and that and that and cry about that, and then create that, which is another false belief about love. And all that's going to do is make it worse. Because now I'm breaking another few laws about the soul and emotions and protection from the very thing that brings me happiness, which is love. You know, I've got so many false beliefs about love. I'm saying love hurts, but I'm also saying now I can protect myself from it. Right? You're not protecting yourself from it. You're harming yourself by trying to do that. Right? It's another false belief. Any false belief about love is going to hurt the most, because love is the highest spiritual principle. You follow? So the average person has a lot of false beliefs about love, and they're completely unwilling to examine them. Yeah?
That's why the soul aspiration is so important.
That's right.
Toward that.
Towards that.
Examining.
Yeah, towards that. Particularly one principle. Can you see the spiritual principle of love? If you do not grasp the principles surrounding love, you are going to create for yourself the maximum amount of pain, because it's the highest principle. Right? And a belief that you can protect yourself from it, and another belief that love actually hurts, which causes you to believe you should protect yourself from it, all of them are false beliefs, and so all of them are actually the cause of your pain about love.
And of course, that's just one false belief you've given there, that I can demand love, that might be driving the love hurts belief.
Yes, only one of many.
There's many that might be driving that belief that love hurts.
Like?
Well, it can be that we've mislabeled love, can't it? This is also very common.
Okay. My version
What others taught me was love hurts.
Yep.
So I'm holding on to a version of love and saying that hurts. So that's love and it hurts. That's love and it hurts. That's love and it hurts. Instead of examining what is my version of love, is that really love?
Is my version of love hurting?
Yes. Because often our version of love does hurt,
Yeah.
but it's not love's fault.
Yes.
Yeah.
And can we put love in quotations? Because actually love never hurts. The actual truth is love never hurts. Ever, 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 never hurts. That's the truth. So if love is hurting me, it can't have been love. You understand? It must have been love, but it's over now. There's all this anguish, right, in the message. And it's hurting them. It wasn't love you're singing about. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because if you feel hurt by it, or the withdrawal of it, then it means it wasn't love anyway. Make sense? Now, I brought up that's just one belief. One. Just one belief about love. Just one. And remember, we've said to you many times, look, it's really wise for you to look at all your beliefs about love. Can you see why? Because if you don't look at them, this is what's going to happen. If we look at this prior diagram, if we don't access the truth about something, and we're not humble about the thing, and we don't understand what love actually is, then no soul aspiration is going to develop. And if that doesn't happen, then what are you left with? Your soul condition. It's going to just stay the same. And it will stay the same as long as your aspiration does not change. That's how long it will stay the same. So people often say, how long does it take for a spirit normally to make changes in the spirit world after they pass? And sometimes I give different examples, but the basic fundamental answer is until their soul aspiration changes. Now, for some people that's 10,000 years. Some people we know from the first century haven't changed yet. Other people it's like 1 or 2 years because they exercised an aspiration to change, right? And their aspiration was strong, so they decided to make the change. Right? So how long you stay in your current condition is completely determined by how long it takes for you to have an aspiration for a different condition.
It's great news.
It's great news. Isn't that good? Yeah, it's definitely good because you have control over how long. Yeah. So up the back, if we can have a mic.
And just so you know, Jay, it's 1:30.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Mary. You said the soul aspiration is a feeling process. Does that mean that it's possible that we could have right now soul aspirations that we maybe don't know cognitively yet, that this has to do with a relationship with God?
Completely possible.
Or longing for a soulmate or passion or truth?
Completely possible, yes. Just because your mind is not able to sense something, it doesn't mean that it's not there. Your mind is really incapable of measuring emotion. So you can settle with your feelings and you would know it's there though. Right? An example of that is the minister we met on Wednesday. I could feel in him that his soul does not agree with the questions he was asking us. His soul doesn't agree. He had different aspirations in his soul than what he had in his mind. His mind aspirations were driven by his intellectual beliefs, and his soul aspirations were driven by his emotional beliefs. Right? So that's interesting. Every person you meet's like that, pretty much, where they might have aspirations in their soul that don't exist in their mind and they're not aware of. If you read the Paget messages carefully, there's many times when we've said that. Oh, that person thinks they this way, but their soul feels very differently. You see, a lot of people learn a belief system on earth, whatever the belief is, about love or about religion or some other thing. They learn that belief system and they have a lot of reasons why they want to retain that belief system. But in their heart, their emotions, they are very suspicious of their own belief systems. An example of that is the average Christian does not accept the Trinity in their heart. They just don't. They can't see it being logical. They can't see it being truthful. It doesn't make any sense to them. And in their heart, they feel God would make sense, and therefore, in their heart, they don't really believe in the Trinity. This is why they've got to argue so much for it in their mind as a belief, because in their heart, they're not even convinced themselves yet that it's true. You follow? It doesn't make any sense to their heart. In their mind, they are absolutely committed to the belief. Absolutely committed. So there's an example of where the heart is very different to what's in the mind. This is why your mind's pretty useless, right? Because at the end of the day, it has a whole heap of things in it, many of which are just indoctrinations. That they are affected by your soul condition, obviously, the emotions you're trying to avoid. So an example of that is, if I, as a Christian, believe that the Trinity is not true, and all of my family and all of my friends are Christians, and they all believe that my changing my belief on God's nature, what makes up God as a Trinity, I'm no longer accepting Jesus is God, I'm no longer accepting the Holy Spirit is God, and I just accept one God. If I do that, they will view it as blasphemy, and in many religious faiths, they will excommunicate you if you believe that. Now, can you see, in my soul I might be very suspicious of the belief. But in my mind I'm going, but if I accept what my soul is telling me about this belief, I have now got a whole heap of other soul problems to address, of all these people attacking me and my family no longer loving me and nobody caring for me anymore, and I haven't got the security of my family looking after me financially or emotionally anymore, and we can't have family gatherings because they've all excommunicated me, and I go through all of that immense amount of soul pressure, and I go, I might as well just stay holding on to the belief.
Well, I'll use my mind to convince myself that my soul suspicion isn't there. So your mind.
So I deny my soul further.
Yeah. Your mind can be a big agent of illusion in your life, depending on other soul aspirations that you have. You might be invested in not seeing, wow, I really am interested in this God character, because your whole social group will think, oh, now you've got religion, how boring, And so you sort of can try to deny that aspiration is even there, because there's another aspiration to hold on to the approval of others.
Thank you.
Or to avoid their disapproval.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yes, it is true that your soul, you may not be aware at all about your soul condition or its true sense or aspiration even, right? Of course, that is only going to be made more difficult, or you say it's easier to deny your soul aspiration the less emotion you feel. Because remember, the brain of your soul is your emotions. So the less sensitive you become to emotion, the easier you are going to find denial of the soul's feelings. Because the brain of the soul is its feelings, its emotions.
And conversely, the more you feel, the harder it's going to be to deny your aspirations.
Exactly.
They'll become very apparent to you.
Yep.
Whether they're positive aspirations or negative.
Or unloving ones, yeah. All right, well, it's probably time. It must be half past, yeah. It's probably time for us. Now, we're not going to continue this conversation after the break, which is the... And the reason why is because I would like you now to go away and use the next period of time before you see us again to work through this understanding of the fundamental understanding of how your soul works. Right? And encourage you to do this. So if you want to take a photo of that, just so to remind you, and obviously there's going to be some video, but we'll leave that there like this. And if you want to take a photo of that, feel free to do so in the break as well, so that you're reminded that, okay, I need to work through these things myself. And what we'd encourage you to do is over the next 11 months before we see you again, is to go, right, I need to understand some things about myself here, how I work, and I need to come to terms with things here about how I work. And then start applying that with the biggest issues in your life. Love, truth, humility, faith. Apply that with your belief about God, your belief about your soul. Apply it with those things first. See how you go with that. See what that looks like. Experiment with that. Because when we come to talk with you next time, we're doing we want to do like a 3-day discussion about sort of sin and how it affects you. And it's all based upon this. Like how to get out of sin is all based upon understanding how your soul works. Because you could say the sin is the current soul condition, right? And aspiration is the thing that has to be developed in order to get out of it, right? So if I don't understand this fundamental principle about my soul and how it works, then how am I ever going to change anything? It's going to be impossible to change anything in my life, right? So I'd encourage you to understand this, pray about it, think about it, read in the Paget messages when you read them, and I'd encourage you to read them over the next year. You will find there's so much about this in them. And when you reread them, you go, wow, now that I look at it from this perspective, I go, oh, now I know what it means by soul condition. Now I know what it means by having an aspiration or a longing. You know, now I understand what's going to drive my aspirations and longings or change them. I understand what they mean by feeling your pain and suffering and why that needs to occur so that I can make changes. You'll start to grasp many of the fundamental spiritual principles that are presented in those messages because you start to understand how it all works internally, or how you work internally. Make sense? That's what we'd encourage you to do. You see, before we can have a more informed discussion about the matter, you need to ponder about it. You need to feel about it. You need to be more open to having the conversation about how this all works in more detail, right, in terms of changing your life. And to do that, it's going to take time. It's going to take, usually it takes a substantial amount of time, you know, more than a year generally. So this is why I'm encouraging you to do this over the next year. Experiment with this. Remind yourself of it every week. Where one thing I would suggest as a part of it, write down the beliefs you can identify right now that are obviously false. Right? And then ask yourself, what aspirations, what truth do I need to accept? How humble am I going to need to be to change those false beliefs so that they are actually not in me emotionally anymore, not just in my mind, but emotionally not there anymore? What do I do? Make sense? Because if you can start to grasp what you can do about this, then change will happen automatically, right, as you do this. And that's what we'd encourage you to do. All right, we'll have a break until,
2:15.
2:15, shall we? Yeah, quarter past. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.